So frustrated. I hate this HSA.
Becky, what's going on?
I just can't get it. It's so hard to read, and the questions are so long.
Well, have you tried stunting the HSA?
Stunting? What's that?
Well, stunting is a simple way to make sure that you do very well on the HSA. The S stands for Survey the Title, Text, Pictures. The T says think about why the author writes the way he or she does. Think about conclusions that you can draw, and think about predictions that you can make while you're reading. The U stands for underline words with a strong connotation or underline main ideas. The N stands for note a short summary of each paragraph or stanza while you read. Finally, the T stands for think about the text when you are done reading. All right. Let's practice stunting together. Open up your packet to page 2 to the poem Minerva Chivi. The first thing that we do is S, survey the text. Let's look at the title of the poem. The title looks like it's a person's name. Maybe this poem is going to be about this person, Mr. Chivi. I see a picture of a suit of armor. Suits of armor were something that knights wore back in the medieval times. This poem might be about the medieval times, or it might be about somebody who's really interested in medieval times. I also noticed that this poem is written by Edward Arlington Robinson. I recognize that name. That's the poet who wrote the poem Richard Cory that we read in my English class. I love that poem. So maybe this will be a poem that has a similar theme. All right, now that I've finished surveying the text, I'm going to go ahead and read through it stanza by stanza and see if I can draw any conclusions, make any predictions, or underline any main ideas. So while you're reading, the part of stunt that you have to remember is the T, the U, and the N. The T stands for think about the text, the U stands for underline, and the N stands for note. Let's practice this together. So as I make notes in the poem, you should be making notes on your copy of the poem. Minerva Chivi, child of scorn, grew lean while he assailed the seasons. He wept that he was ever born, and he had reasons. Okay, right here in the first line, I noticed that it says that Chivi is a child of scorn. I'm going to underline the word scorn. I'm not 100% sure what that word means, but I know it has a very negative connotation. So there's something negative we're saying about Chivi. I need to look out for that to see if I can figure out what it is negative that we're saying about him. The next line says, grew lean while he assailed the seasons. Hear this word lean. I know the word lean is used to describe meats that are low in fat, but they're saying that Chivi himself grew lean. If lean refers to meats that are low in fat, maybe that means that Chivi himself is getting skinny. That's interesting. I'll have to think about that. While he assailed the seasons. He wept that he was ever born. This seems like a really important line to me because it talks about him and it says that he wept, which means he cried, that he was ever born. So apparently he's really sad to have ever been born. He's clearly really depressed. Now this helps support my prediction that he's growing skinny because when people are depressed, sometimes they lose weight. And he had his reasons. Okay, so obviously they're going to be talking about Chivi's reasons for being so depressed in the next couple stanzas. Now, since they're talking about him being depressed, in this stanza, I know that's a really important part of the poem. So I'm going to really be looking out for the reasons why he's depressed. Take a minute to underline scorn, lean, the third line of the poem, and reasons before we move on to the second stanza. Oh, one more thing I forgot. We also have to make a note, a summary after each stanza. So this stanza right here basically is giving me an explanation that Chivi doesn't much care for his life. So right next to the stanza, I'm going to write MC, those are Chivi's initials, hates his life. He's not a very happy guy. All right, now that I have that summary there, I'm ready to move on to the next stanza. Minerva loved the days of old, when swords were bright and steeds were prancing. The vision of a warrior bold would send him dancing. I'm going to take a minute to think about that stanza before I do anything. Okay, I see this phrase, days of old. Let's underline that phrase. Now, this phrase is a little unfamiliar to me, but I do recognize the word old. So they're talking about something that's old. The olden days, maybe days of old refers to the past. Let's see if I can confirm that. When swords were bright and steeds were prancing. Swords. That reminds me of the suit of armor right here. There's a sword there. So maybe days of old refers to the times when people used swords and bright steeds were prancing. I'm not sure what a steed is. I'm not going to stress out about that. But I do know that we're talking about a time when people used swords. The vision of a warrior bold. A warrior bold. Just like this guy wearing a suit of armor. Would send him dancing. So, he loved the days of old, or old times, when people had swords, were warriors. And these visions would send him dancing. Now, the word dancing has a very positive connotation, so I'm going to underline that. Okay? Even though the first stanza is negative, apparently thinking about the days of old, swords and warriors, makes Chivi happy. So this is kind of like one of the things that really helps his depression. Okay, can anybody remember what I have to do after I'm done reading the stanza? Remember the end part of stunned. You need to note a summary right next to it. So, based on this little stanza right here, I know that MC loved old times. He loved the past, the times when people wore suits of armor and all that. Okay, third stanza. Minerva sighed for what was not, and dreamed and rested from his labors. He dreamed of Thebes and Camelot, and Priam's neighbors. There's a lot of words in this stanza that I don't know, but I think I can figure it out. First of all, I see the word sigh. I'm going to underline that because it has a strong connotation. Make sure you're making these notes with me. You should have notes on your phone. Sigh has a negative connotation. It's what people do when they're regretful or sad about something. So Minerva, we go back to talking about why he's sad. And he sighed about what was not, or things that aren't going on. And dreamed and rested from his labors. So he's thinking about something. He's probably thinking about the days of old. He dreamed of Thebes and Camelot and Priam's neighbors. Well, the word Camelot and Priam, I don't know those words, but Thebes is familiar to me. Where do I know that from? Oh, that's right. Thebes is the name of the city in the play Antigone that I read in my English class. I know that the play Antigone takes place in ancient Greece. So Thebes is another reference to the old times. So once again, we've confirmed the idea that Minerva really loves the old times. Here he's talking about the times when there were knights around. And here he's talking about ancient Greece. So I think that for this stanza, I'm going to just say the same thing. This is another example of how he loved the old times or ancient times. So next to the stanza, I'm going to write MC loved ancient times. Now, before I move on to the next stanza, I just want to summarize. We know that Chivi is unhappy about his life. He's depressed, but he does love the old times, and he loves ancient, like Greece and all that. He loves history, okay? So, what is he sad about, I wonder? It says he sighed for what was not, so maybe he's just sad that he wasn't alive back during the old times. Okay, I'm going to move on to the third stanza now, recognizing that this does take a long time to read like this, but when I get to the questions, it's going to go a lot quicker. Third stanza.